What is up, my nerds? Welcome back to Lore of the Worlds. Today we're going to be talking about Secret Project 4, otherwise known as the Sunlit Man. So this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so please keep that in mind before jumping right in. If you need to read it, go read it, and then come back, we'll talk all about it. I absolutely cannot wait to get started on this one, so let's just go ahead and jump right in and start exploring the Sunlit Man. I will see you right after the title. So as you may have guessed, the eponymous Sunlit Man was our main protagonist throughout this book. We know him best as a side character from the Stormlight Archive named Sigzil, but during the chronology of this book we see his transition from a nameless wanderer, literally going by Nomad, into someone with a connection, both lower and uppercase C connection, to the people of Canticle, who give him the name Zellian. We follow his journey in rediscovering himself, his values, and, of course, his sword, which has particularly hefty physical and metaphorical significance for those of us that have read Stormlight. I absolutely loved his journey in the book, and I found him to be more interesting and relatable than we've ever seen him during the course of Stormlight, at least so far. Watching him tread this path of rediscovering his moral compass felt powerful and really resonated with me. His character was well written and was an absolute masterclass in this sort of storyline. The thing is, we've seen this before in Stormlight, like, all the time, right? And that is where the other characters' journeys come in. Each in their own way, the side characters of the Sunlit Man both emphasized and augmented the journey Nomad was on throughout the book, elevating it, in my opinion at least, above any character work that we've seen from Sanderson thus far. I really loved Ox. He was a really fun take on living magic, a unprecedented result of what can happen while messing with magic you don't necessarily understand. But beyond that, Ox's roboticness became endearing incredibly quickly. He gave me Data from Star Trek vibes in, like, the best possible way. And while the Spren we've seen in Stormlight so far have definitely been partners to their bonded, the relationship between Ox and Nomad felt a lot deeper to me than that. Deeper than a mere partnership. It felt like they were real friends. I could feel Nomad's pain at having caused his friends suffering, and I can only imagine the guilt that he would carry with himself for having nearly killed him. In fact, it's something that Nomad is constantly forced to confront, but is never ever numb to. And when Ox makes his own sacrifice at the end of the book, it was powerful, right? Nomad didn't want to give up his best friend, his companion, but together, they made the sacrifice in service of others. So, who are these others? The residents of Canticle are all in some way descendants from Threnody, and thus have all sorts of funky names. Zeal, Jeffrey, and Adonalcium will remember our plight eventually, just to name a few. But the two main characters that we focus on in the city of Beacon are two sisters named Elegy and Rebecca. We see Rebecca's pain at watching her sister become a Chard, and hoping beyond hope that her sister is still there somewhere deep down. In a way, she's sorta right, but not really. Elegy's soul was more or less completely burned out by the cinder placed in her chest, and indeed her journey throughout most of the book is learning to regain her humanity. Now that I think about it, Elegy's journey is actually a pretty good parallel to Zellian's throughout the book. Magic absolutely messed with her soul, and she's relearning how to live in a society, in other words, how to be human, how to connect with other people. Connect being a lowercase c here. I'm going to take a moment to stop and really commend Sanderson on a trend that I've seen running throughout his novels. That is, humanizing the other. We see it pop up in all sorts of places throughout the Cosmere. There's the Koloss on Scadrial, the Parkshendi on Roshar, and here the Chard on Canticle, just to name a few. It would be absolutely incredibly easy for Sanderson to say that these fantasy races are straight up representations of evil, but in every case, he lets the humanity of each individual being shine through. And I really appreciate that about Sanderson's books, this viewpoint that though others may act act differently, look differently, or literally be a different race, they are no less deserving of respect than any other individual humans. So, in other words, judge people based on what they do, not what they are. Good job, Sanderson. Put that all together and you have a book whose character work is absolutely stellar. Zellian's journey is like a distilled version of a Stormlight plot, and then you mix in all these other interesting and unique characters, and it's great. I loved it. The Sunlit Man scores a 9 out of 10 for character. Plot and structure. As mentioned earlier, this novel's main story beats follow a similar pattern as that of a Stormlight book, just boiled down into a much more condensed format. In essence, I could see exactly where the story was going from the very first page, which in this case is alright. I mean, if you're watching this, you're probably familiar with the idea of journey before destination. And indeed, this is a book whose journey is infinitely more important than where it ends up. And yeah, the journey was lovely. It flowed super well for me, though that may have admittedly been helped along by my deeper understanding of all the lore stuff going on in the background. I can totally see how, if you're not familiar with Cosmere realmatics, aka fake physics mixed in with a dash of real physics, I could see how this plot would come off as too concerned with the magical aspects of what's going on. But, frankly, and I say this with all love, this book wasn't really for those people, was it? This was a book for the giant Cosmere nerds. Plot points such as the desperate need to get off planet are enhanced and deepened by one's own knowledge of deeper Cosmere mechanics, and the plot works just fine as a I gotta get out of here kind of book, but again, the reader is significantly rewarded by understanding why we gotta get off planet, what is chasing him, why does this all matter in the end? Which is left pretty open-ended for those who aren't familiar with the deeper Cosmere lore. Structurally, the book just keeps building on its premise in interesting ways, ratcheting up that tension at every single step along the way. The only real stoppage in momentum is when Sigzil had to do some, fake physics theorizing about how to build a steam jet, which felt a little bizarre stuck towards the middle of the book. I felt like we could have used a little less of that, but I'm really picking nits at this point. It was generally pretty darn good and flowed super well. From the very beginning of the book, we're pointed in a singular, clear direction for the plot. Get to the Scadrian way station and figure it out from there, and one singular, clear direction for character growth. Remember who and what you're fighting for. And those clear objectives serve to anchor the plot as we go through the twists and turns of figuring out all of Canticle's weirdness. And this clear direction works extremely well to let us focus on the journey of getting there. There wasn't anything particularly new or interesting going on here, plotting and structure-wise, but they served the story super well for what they are. 8 out of 10 for plot and structure. Okay, right off the bat, I am telling you this book is getting a 10 out of 10 for lore. It explores new aspects of concepts we already knew while adding new, interesting elements to flesh out the space age of the Cosmere and the progression of technology, all while leaving more than enough loose threads and hints at future and past events to keep us guessing. I loved the deeper exploration of everything from dawn shards to new magic systems on Canticle, using a framework for understanding the inner working of magic that we're already somewhat familiar with. And I really cannot wait to see the diverse and interesting takes on spaceships that we're going to be getting as we move closer to the space age of the Cosmere. And can we talk about shades for a second? What is their deal? There's the chorus on Beacon, there's the independent shades on the bridge of the Knights Brigade ship at the end. There's something seriously wrong with the spirit webs of the descendants of Threnody, and I absolutely cannot wait to explore these darker aspects of the Cosmere that have been kind of lurking around in the background for ages. I really hope we get to delve into those in the space age. This was an absolute tour of force in fantasy book lore, and a reminder that Sanderson is possibly the best fantasy author alive for aspects of world building and lore. I'm going to be absolutely diving deep into the lore of Sunlit Man and all of the secret projects for that matter sometime very soon, so stay tuned for that. Instant 10 out of 10 for lore. There's a total of one lit man in this book, both physically and metaphorically. Nomad was, of course, physically lit by the sun several times throughout the book, and he's also just metaphorically effing lit. I suppose you could argue that the Cinder King was like lit internally, but that guy kind of sucks, so we're just gonna disregard him. And for those of you arguing in the comments about this incredibly important topic of analysis, it should be noted that every other man that was lit by the sun was very quickly no longer a man. So go argue over something else. Might I suggest the topics of spoilers or pronunciation, perhaps? Those seem to be very fun to argue about in my comment sections. In other words, the Sunlit Man holds a score of 1 out of 1 lit men. So, in conclusion, The Sunlit Man was a good book with excellent lore that is elevated significantly by understanding the mechanics, characters, and politics of the Cosmere. Scoring-wise, we have a 9 out of 10 for character, an 8.5 out of 10 for plot and structure, a 10 out of 10 for lore, and a score of 1 out of 1 lit men. If this is but a small preview of where the Cosmere is heading, I cannot wait. Like, seriously, the space age just seems so inventive and interesting, and I am going to be so freaking excited when we get there. I know, journey before destination, but like at the same time, are we there yet? And this is completely unrelated to anything, but I watched the series finale of The Curse recently, in fact right before filming this, and now I can't imagine Nathan Fielder as anything but a Skybreaker. If you know, you know. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Lore of the Worlds, and I'm off to change my lighting up for the Yumi review. Thank you folks for tuning in today. It's been a ton of fun putting this video together. If you enjoy what I do on this channel, I would urge you to consider supporting me over on Patreon. Not only does it directly support the channel, you also get early access to content, channel updates, previews, and much more.